Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you all very much for joining us, and it's a real honour to be hosting this evening. I'm Rabbi Jeremy Gordon from New London Synagogue, and we're really honoured to be producing this commemoration this evening in conjunction with the Spiral Arc, and Nitsa to have you here leading us, leading the Spiral Arc for so many years is a pleasure and an honour. What we have is a sort of an evening in three parts. The first, about 15 minutes, will be a short commemorative ceremony. We'll be lighting some candles. We have some music, some very beautiful music, which has been set by Julian, and Julian will say a little bit more about that music as we go. I'm also really honoured that Mother Kate is joining us from St Mark's on Hamilton Terrace, just down the road, and we will be honouring those who lost their lives in the Holocaust who weren't Jewish. It's something moving about Holocaust Memorial Day that it's an international day of commemoration and reflection. The date, of course, is formally tomorrow, which marks on this year the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz-Birkenau, and it's a very moving time, and I'm really honoured that you're here to join with us. If you have a mobile phone or anything that is likely to beep and disturb us at this time, please do. We are streaming, and just to let you know. And then just one other piece. There are, as I was saying, some pieces of music, and also there'll be a memorial prayer and a mourner's kaddish. It would be appropriate not to applaud after the music, as beautiful as I'm sure it will be, and maybe we can share some applause at the end. So once we finish with the ceremony, we'll have the opportunity to hear from Dr Nizan, who's joining us from Israel, to celebrate the launch, the publication of her book. I'll say more about that, and Dr Nizan will say much more about that later. There'll be some short questions after that. And then people are invited to join us for some brief refreshments next door at the end of our time in here. Without further ado, we're going to begin with the piece The Butterfly, sung by Maya Sayag, accompanied by Joseph Finley, composed by Julian Dawes.
Chestnut branches in the court. called The Butterfly, and it's from a song cycle of 11 songs called I Never Saw Another Butterfly. The poems in I Never Saw Another Butterfly were all written by children in Theresienstadt, Tennessee. And this particular one was, the poem was written in 1942 by a young man called Pavel Friedman. I've written two song cycles about the Holocaust. I Never Saw Another Butterfly, which the music was written in 2011, and I've also written Songs of Ashes, which is a setting of 15 poems by the Polish poet Reuven. It was written in 1991 and first performed in 1992. And Nietzsche has a big part to play in this work because I was looking for, I wanted to write about the Holocaust for a range of reasons. And I went to Nietzsche to see if she could suggest some poetry that would be very appropriate. And if you can believe this, when I met her for the first time in her office, she was sitting there with Wagner's great-grandson. And I explained what I was looking for, and the two of them looked at each other and immediately pointed me towards A Reading of Ashes, which is the set of poems by Vysotsky. She also, the Spinal Harp, was also responsible for putting on the first performance of Songs of Ashes in 1992. Thank you.
Can I invite, please, Daniel Silberstan, Lewandowski, Angela Gluck, Cynthia Palman, Margot Schwartz, Nisa Spire, and Alan Sanders to come just join me to my left, and other case if you could join at the end of that row. We're going to continue lighting memorial candles. We're going to light 6 yellow candles. This is a project that was started by a number of members of New North London Synagogue and hugely supported by Maccabi GB. Millions of these candles have been lit, each one in honour of someone who passed away in the Holocaust. Daniel, I'd like you to come. You could start with the far candle, please. If you could read the little patek and then light the candle.
This is a candle to the honor of Israel Perleman of Munax.
I light this candle in memory of Daniel Perelman of Cementero, who perished there in 1942 at the age of 5.
I light this candle in honor of Janusz Perelman of Warsaw.
I'm lighting this candle in memory of Serafima Perelman of Simferopol, who perished there in 1942 at age 10.
It's an incredible honour to be here today to represent the righteous Gentiles, and particularly Father Louis Kellis, who along with his family risked their lives for their Jewish neighbours. And whilst we give thanks for their bravery, it's a solemn reminder of our calling for all of eternity to stand up for the oppressed. In a world which seems increasingly hostile, my prayer is that whenever needed, I too will find the strength and courage to be counted amongst the righteous.
Please rise. We'll continue with the memorial prayer, which will be led by David Shema.
מלא רחמים, שוכן במרומים, המצא מנוחה נכונה תחת כנפי השכינה, במעלות קדושים וטהורים, כזוהר הרקיע מזהירים, לנשמות כל אחינו ואחיותינו בני ישראל שנשחטו בשואה ושהלכו לעולמם. אנא בעל הרחמים, תסתירם בסתר כנפיך לעולמים, וצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתם. אדוני הוא נחלתם, וינוחו ושלום על משכבם, ונאמר אמן.
Monas Kaddish. Yitgadal Yitgadash Shemei Rabbah.
אמן.
Yamad Yivrach Yerusei Yamlich Malchutei. V'chayachon u'biyomechon. Chayei b'chol Beit Yisrael. Bagalau b'zman kariv Yimru Amen.
אמן.
Yehei Shemei Rabbah Borach Ve'olam Yadem Hayam. Yitbarach Yishtabach. Yitpa'al Yitromam Yitnaseh. Yitada Yitale Yitalal. Shemei Yisha Rechu. Leilam min kol birchata v'shirata. Shushbachata v'nechmata. Yamiran v'yalma yimru. Amen.
אמן.
Yehei shlama rabba min shemayim. V'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael yimru.
אמן.
Oseh shalom b'mroma. Hu yaseh shalom. Aleinu v'al kol Yisrael yimru.
אמן.
Please be seated. We're going to continue and conclude the commemorative part of this evening with two pieces of music from Julian sung by Sayag, accompanied by Joseph Finley, the 7 words, and that will be followed by the silence of the earth.
Mommy, but I've been good. It's dark.
was extraordinary, and thank you. We change gear. It's a real honour to welcome Dr. Nizan to New London Synagogue. We've had a problem with getting the actual books. When I say hot off the press, so hot, not quite here yet. So I'll say this again at the end, but we do have reduced cost copies of the books that are going to be available. They're £55 to you today, £25, but we'll need to make an arrangement to get those books to you. So we have an opportunity to celebrate their publication and to be inspired and I'm sure moved by the story of the Oneg Shabbat Ghetto Archive and Emanuel Ringelblum and Reuven Ben-Shem's war writings, Perceptions of Space in the Warsaw Ghetto by Dr. Nizan. Welcome.
Yes. Good evening, everyone. My name is Dr Nizan or Vicky Nizan, and I'll be speaking to you today about my book, which is the study of the diaries of Emanuel Ringelblum and Reuven Ben-Shem. Both of them were incarcerated in the Warsaw Ghetto, and they escaped the ghetto around February 1943. Can you hear me? Okay. The title of my book is on the background of the cemetery in Warsaw, but the picture was taken quite recently, a few years ago. Okay, what is the book about? First of all, what was analyzed, I already said, it's the two diaries. The purpose was to find in the diaries evidence that the writers realized the connection between downsizing the ghetto and the final annihilation of the Jewish people as a global enterprise, not something that is local. The book is divided into three parts. The first part deals with the connection between history and politics, because it was something very prominent in East Europe that they saw their role to study the history of the Jews, draw conclusions from it, and operate politically in favor of the Jews. So it was something that everybody was involved, was something very democratic. The idea began almost 50 years before that. It was initiated by Simon Dubnov in 1891 when he published a call around the Jewish world asking to collect testimonies, diaries, interviews, anything that was connected to Judaism, and they would send it to the scholars who would analyze it and work on it. And, excuse me, I have a terrible cold. And so there was a very, very strong connection between the scholars and ordinary people. Sorry. Can I have some water, please? No? It's mine? Oh, thank you. Emanuel Ringelblum and Reuven Ben-Shem were both the product of this education. Each of them was influenced by history and were very much involved in it. Both of them graduated from the University of Warsaw in history. לא צפוי הדבר הזה. And they also based their political agenda according to Jewish history. The second part of the book deals with literature of the Holocaust, because what happened is it's not only Ringelblum and Ben-Shem, but all the Jewish world that was influenced by this approach. And so to speak, Jews kind of arrived prepared in a way to the Second World War in terms. Really sorry. In terms of documentation. They had experience of about 50 years already dealing with all kinds of events that related to documentation. So as soon as the war broke out, many Jews got involved in it. Actually, we have more than 100,000 records. Some of them are testimonies, diaries, all kinds of records. But all of them were initiated by the Jews themselves, some community work also, in order to study what happened during the war. So the second part of the book deals with it. And the third part of the book, the private and the public sphere, discusses actually what appears in the diary of Ringelblum and Ben-Shem. How they saw what was going on in the ghetto, what they decided to speak about, and how the things that the Germans were doing in the ghetto actually caused the collapse of the private and the public sphere, and actually mingled them together, making people completely lost in space. My methodology, you know, in academic research, you need some theories in order to work on. So I took that methodology from history. This is, of course, the historical records, official and non-official. And I also used close reading technique in literature in order to study the text itself. In other words, how the writers decided to write what they documented, because it is about decision. I mean, you can write many things, but the question is how you do it. I looked at choices of words. For example, if I wanted to find out how they're related to the badge, I looked up words that were related to the badge, also terms that related to the badge. And most of all, I think, is the decision that the writers made not to record things they decided not to write about. Just to give you a hint, Emanuel Ringelblum never wrote anything about the personal affairs of anyone, whereas Ben-Shem did once in a while, not as a rule, but he did. And the reasons are quite obvious. Now, the theories that I based my research was first of all on Henri Lefebvre, because his theory talks about space being something produced by people, not a place, but what people make of what they have in a certain place. Mary Douglas speaks about the same thing, but in the house. A house is a lot more than just a place. It is, what people make of it. And Julia Kristeva, who discussed what makes people disgusted. And why is this important? Because what happened in the ghetto was revolting on the streets and inside the houses, and made people really lose their focus of how things were going on. What are my findings? First of all, writing reflected the blurring of boundaries between the private and the public sphere. In other words, there was no home and there was no outside, no real distinction. People from the inside, thank you. People just flew outside in order to find rescue, because inside it was certain death. On the other hand, when people were inside, indoors, in the evening, for example, when there was curfew and it was not permitted to go out, you could hear the voices from the streets of those who had nowhere to go, like the children, the beggars who remained in the street despite the orders not to leave to go indoors. Now, as I said, for Ringelblum and Ben-Shem, studying history was a vocation. They realized that if you're Jewish, you have to be involved in the society, because your personal life is affected immediately by how Jews are treated. It's not something personal, but it's something that has to do with society, which means that they expected to draw conclusion from history in order to learn something about politics. So that's what they did. They've already done that for 50 years. But now they saw that politics was not something that they could be implemented because Germans did not want to negotiate with them at all. There was no question about it. Now, once Jews realized it, and it took some time to realize that, their initiative and their desire to write even increased, because they realized that this might be the only trace left of Jews. This history, this story that nobody else, that the Germans simply don't want them to live there. And the insight is that the Richard is unique because of this combination of methodology, because it enables to expose the effects of the interaction between the space and the people inside the ghetto. It also showed that the language, I mean, the mere act of writing was something used in order to rebuild a world that became more and more unclear, more and more illogical. Let me tell you a little bit about the diaries. That is Emanuel Ringelblum. On the left, you see him, his baby boy Uri, and his wife Judith. And there's another picture of Judith. This is actually the only picture of her by herself. And in the middle, they are together. So Emanuel Ringelblum is well known. He was a historian. He was born in 1900 in the city of Buchach, which is in East Galicia. And he studied history at the Warsaw University in the 1920s, graduating in 1927 and writing his dissertation on the situation of the Jews in the Middle Ages in Poland. He was left, very left. He was member of Left Poalei Zion, which means that he was actually Marxist Jewish, and he was very, very keen on this way of thinking, although most of the people he worked with didn't feel any pressure or something of the sort to convert to his way of thinking in any way. So Ringelblum also worked with the JDC, the Jewish Distribution Organization, and he was also a researcher at EVO, and EVO is a Jewish Research Institute erected by Jews, supported by Jews, supported by the masses. No government was ever involved in this, and no government obviously supported it. In 1938, Ringelblum had the chance, if we can call it a chance, to try first-hand documentation, because he was sent by the JDC to Zbonsin, which is a city on the border between Poland and Germany, where German Jews of Polish origin were deported, but the Polish government refused to accept them inside. He documented what was going on there. It took about a month and a half to solve this crisis. Everything was lost. We didn't survive. Sorry. But once the Second World War broke out, he established, almost a month after the war started, the Oneg Shabbat archive. At the beginning, he was by himself. He was the only writer. Actually, his records from the first year are almost the only ones that exist from the first year. And later on, more and more people joined this group of people of documenting what is going on in the ghetto. Documenting, I mean, collecting everything, letters, posters, orders, anything that move. And in addition to this, conducting also research during this period of time. One of the most important research they conducted then was about the effect of hunger. The results of this research were published in 1943, if I'm not mistaken, in Paris. Really important work they did all this time. Ringelblum escaped with his family from the ghetto in February 1943. But once in a while, he would go back into the ghetto. And in one of those times, he was captured, and he was sent to the camp of Travniki, which was somewhere near Lublin. It was a gruesome place, and all the people in this concentration camp were eventually murdered in one of the biggest murder acts taken place in November 1943, that the German called it Harvest Festival. Anyway, Ringelblum was rescued. 2 people rescued him from the camp and managed to bring him back to Warsaw, where he joined his wife and child. They were hiding under a greenhouse in a Polish neighbor, and their hiding place was also discovered, unfortunately, in March 1944, and everybody in this hideout, they were all murdered. During the second, let's say the second period that Ringelblum was in Warsaw, I mean, since he was rescued from the camp, he also kept writings, but the writing was not about what was going on in the hideout, but a kind of, I would say, memorial to the perished community of the Jews of Warsaw. He wrote 2 parts. It was this one and another part which was written in Polish, and it was about Jewish-Polish relations during the war. The rest of the diary was written originally in Yiddish. The second character I would like to talk about is Reuven Ben-Shem. Here you can see him in his youth. It's a very special picture because it has all kinds of slogans from HaShomer HaTzair. If anybody knows anything here about HaShomer HaTzair, today it's a very left youth movement. Then it wasn't left. It was an apolitical movement, and he was member of this group until 1925, when they did become, with a turn to the left. This is his wife, Pnina, or Perla. This is the only picture that exists of his wife. It's actually taken from an attempt to rescue the family and issue passports. So that's the only picture that we have, and this is why it's so unclear. This was their daughter, Yosima. She was born in 1929, and this is Reuven Ben-Shem when he's older, already in Israel. He is a very special character. Like Emanuel Ringelblum, he was born in Buchach. He was born also in 1900, more or less had the same education. But unlike Ringelblum, he joined HaShomer HaTzair, and with HaShomer HaTzair, he immigrated to Israel. Well, it was Palestine at the time. I'm talking about 1919. And he spent about a year here in Israel, establishing one settlement, and then another kibbutz. But then the news arrived to him that his father had been murdered in the riots of the pogroms that the Ukrainians were conducting in the Soviet Union at the time, and he returned to Poland. He returned and he resumed his studies. He graduated also from the Vienna University in history, and also as a rabbi. And all this time he was very much active in the youth movement of HaShomer HaTzair, until, as I said, 1925, when he decided that's it, they are too leftist, I don't want anything to do with it, and I'm going to go to the right. But this did not stop him from supporting the left too. I mean, wherever he went, wherever there were groups of Jews, of youngsters, he would go and help them, and he was very, very, very active. People loved him. He was full of, life, happiness. whatever. He really, really didn't care. Later in his life, he explained that he just didn't care about politics. All he cared was to educate the young to immigrate to Palestine and settle a Jewish state. Reuven Ben-Shem has spent his, made his living from writing in several newspapers, translations, and of course working with the youth movements. He established several youth movements, all of them very similar to one another, but still, he did it. He was happy, a person, very happy person. He married Penina in 1929, and they had Yosima immediately afterwards. Yosima was a pianist prodigy. She was very, very talented, and the family went into, when the war broke out, what happened is that they decided to leave. They decided to escape Warsaw, trying to arrive to Lublin, thinking that maybe being under the Russian government would be better for them. But they managed to travel only 70 kilometers south of Warsaw, and they were caught up by the Germans. So they returned to Warsaw. And in February 1943, they escaped the ghetto, leaving for the village of Pustelnik, which is more or less near Warsaw. But Yosima died 2.5 months later. She was already very, very sick with weakness, and the life in the ghetto was extremely difficult for her, and she was beyond recovery. Her mother died a year later. Reuven Ben-Shem left this village in July 1944, went straight to Lublin because Lublin was already liberated. And in Lublin, he became for the first time in his life a rabbi, and he established the Jewish Commission, a historical commission, starting with collecting testimonies from the survivors who flocked to the city, who heard that the city was liberated. There he met Ruth Halberstadt. Ruth Halberstadt became his second wife. They fled Poland because they got word that he was going to be arrested because he is because he is a right-wing representative. And they arrived in Palestine in November 1946. They had 2 children, Nekamia or Kami, and Yoezra or Rina. They have several names, the children. Reuven Ben-Shem and Ringelblum did not like each other. Especially Ringelblum didn't like him because, leftists think that people who are not leftists, they're not nice. And this is what happened. He even mentioned it 3 times in his diary, not with very favorable words, even though he was a really very positive character. Ben-Shem didn't, at least didn't in the diary that we know, but soon you will understand why. Okay, more pictures. On the left, this is a party that was thrown. That's Reuven Ben-Shem in his youth. Was thrown in his honor 2 years after he already left the guys of HaShomer HaTzair, but they gave him a party in Krakow. And this is a poster from Yosima's concert. She gave 2 concerts in the ghetto. This is one of them on April 1941. And this is Reuven Ben-Shem's new family. This is Nekamia when he was about 10 years old. This is his brother Gad, the only survivor from the family. This is Rachel Auerbach. I will talk about her in a minute. That's Reuven Ben-Shem, and that's his wife Ruth, and the little girl Rina. So Rachel Auerbach was actually the only link between Emanuel Ringelblum and Reuven Ben-Shem in the ghetto. She was his cousin, and she resided with the Ben-Shems in the family, in their house, all the years of the ghetto until the liquidation started. But she was also a very much valued worker of the Onyx Shabbat archive that Emanuel Ringelblum established. And he was very much full of admiration for her work in the ghetto. Wait a minute, sorry. Okay, the sources. Now, the sources I'm talking about, I have five sources that are listed. The first one is the original, well, not the original, but the diary of Reuven Ben-Shem that I worked on, but it's not this edition. Okay, this book came out, amazingly enough, a month ago. He tried to publish his diary for years, and he didn't succeed, but eventually it happened a month ago, 44 years, I think, after his death. The other two books here, this and this one, these are by Ringelblum, and they are translation to Hebrew, because the original diary, as I said, was in Yiddish, and I listed also the Yiddish books, but I couldn't rely on them because they are not complete. I mean, again, amazingly enough, Emanuel Ringelblum's diary doesn't even exist in English. I mean, it exists, but from the 1950s. A full work on these writings did not happen yet. I think that the Jewish Institute in Warsaw is doing something about it, but today there is no complete record of Emanuel Ringelblum in English. These are the versions in Hebrew, and they are complete. This is a sample of Emanuel Ringelblum's handwritten diary from the Yiddish part. It looks really nice, but Emanuel Ringelblum's records were buried. At the end not at the end, before he left the ghetto, he decided to bury all the archive because it was certain that an uprising was about to happen. So they buried it in 3 different places. The first one was discovered by Rachel Orbach, Hirschwasser, and his wife. They are the only 3 survivors of the Onyx Shabbat workers. They knew where the place was, even though if you look at the pictures of the ghetto after the war, it's just fields and fields of rubble. But they found one part. The second part was accidentally discovered in the 1950s when there was constructions in Warsaw, and the third part was not found to this day. As for Reuven Ben-Shem, I put here 2 pages because this is the original diary. You see the stains of water. It's very difficult to read, and how dense the writing is. You can only imagine what it meant to find even paper or a pen in that situation. And this is what Yad Vashem calls the deciphered part. This was prepared by Reuven Ben-Shem himself. I told you he wanted to publish his book, his diary. He chose from this whole business that he had, he chose to begin the diary for publication only on November 16, 1940. And that's the day that the Warsaw Ghetto was sealed. But the ghetto existed more than a year before that. He ends this part in April 3rd, when Yosima is going with someone to be hidden in a certain place. He didn't get to the part, or he probably didn't want to, even though I don't know. He probably didn't want to speak about her death, because the 3rd of April is almost 3 weeks before she died. She died on April 21st, on the 2nd day of Pesach. This is the record I work with. I showed you the book. I didn't have the book when I worked on it. This is what I had. A very thin paper, if you all remember how they used to print it on typing machines, and they glued it into a cardboard in black was not easy to read this. 700 pages he prepared. More to go. We still have to decipher the others. So where did the whole business took place? This is the Warsaw Ghetto in several periods. I hope I will be, yes. Everything that is in red is actually the old ghetto. So it's kind of a very weird shape. In the book I explain why the shape is so strange. But what Ringelblum and Ben-Shem discuss is what happened in this area. If you can see, allegedly the Jewish cemetery is separated and it's not part of the ghetto. Not exactly. It was part of the ghetto, but obviously people don't live there unless they work there, and there is an important person that lived there. But it was at the grounds of smuggling, the Jewish cemetery, a very, very good spot to smuggle and to hide foods inside graves and things of this sort. Now, after the liquidation of the ghetto began, it was torn first into three parts. We have the part in the south, which was actually a factory, and the Germans called it a shop. It belonged to a person called Tobens, a German, but this place was very quickly liquidated by August 10, 1942, which is less than a month since the deportations begin. This factory was destroyed, and all the workers sent to Treblinka. Now, the area, the green area, was returned to the Polish government, the Polish authorities of Warsaw. The second part that is important is this one, the one in orange. First of all, this is where the Umschlagplatz was, the place where the Jews were deported to Treblinka. And people living in the area, the orange, are on people who had permission of some sort. And who had permission? Social workers had permission, people belonging to the community, the Jewish police, the family of the Jewish police, but everybody knew it was temporary. And there was another shop, this one, the one in brown, the brushmaker's shop. It's a very interesting story. I'm not going to go into this now, but it was a place where many important people were hidden from the Germans, but eventually also this factory was liquidated. Now, Reuven Ben-Shem describes what happens in the shop. This is the area. You see the plenty of dots. These are different shops that existed in this particular area. Around this area, this part, are empty houses of people who were deported to Treblinka. This part was returned, only the small part here, was neighboring the Polish Warsaw. Reuven Ben-Shem, to my knowledge, is almost the only person who dedicated so much to writing about the shops. And from his story, we learn about not only what happened in this particular shop, but in other shops. And what are the shops? They are factories that were erected by Germans in order to make money and to profit from free labor of Jews. Simple as that. They didn't exist only then. They existed since 1941. But once the ghetto was starting to be liquidated, it became, well, let's say the Germans let the Jews understand that this is a life-saving certificate, and people really, really did any efforts that they could make in order to be part of this shop, because the other option was the Umschlagplatz, going to Treblinka. That's it. That's what they had in the ghetto. So this is the area I'm talking about, and about two different periods. The period when all the ghetto existed, but also after liquidation began. I do not get to the part of the uprising. Okay, these are the stages of how the Germans ruined the Jews. First, December 1939, as of this date, every Jew in the general government was the term given by Hans Frank to the areas that were not annexed to Germany, but were parts of Poland. Every Jew in this area had to wear an identifying badge. I've put here several examples of badges just to show you how much the Germans invested, in order to invent a particular badge for their particular Jews. So take a look at this. In Yugoslavia, it was the letter. In Germany, it was the Star of David with the word Jude inside, as if a person wearing a Magen David is not a Jude. So you have to be more explicit. Oh, sorry guys. Whoa. Yeah. In Bulgaria, amazingly enough, this is a button. Somebody had to manufacture buttons. Can you imagine that? Buttons in the shape of Magen David. You can see the girl wearing the button and the father. The others I don't see very well. Maybe the mother is too. Anyway, and this is Warsaw. In Warsaw, as I said, part of the general government. We're talking about wearing a ribbon around the arm that had the blue Star of David. And this is, I put this picture in order for you to see how the street looked. When you look at the street, you see all these white dots. These white dots are Jews. And this is how Warsaw looked to a person before the ghetto was sealed. This is very, very important. Before the ghetto was sealed, everybody remained in their own houses, so to speak. But a Jew that came out of the house wearing this thing was a target. You're going to tell me the Jews wearing a kippah are also a target? Yes, they are. But before the Germans, this was not allowed. Once the Germans are there, true, it's easy to identify some Jews because of the way they dress. But there are many others that cannot be identified. And anyway, wearing this badge means you can do whatever you want with this person. You're not going to be punished. And that's a very difficult situation for the Jews of Warsaw to endure. By the way, not of Warsaw, because I'm talking about Warsaw, but please, it's not only Warsaw. It's very difficult, but you have to calculate. What are you going to do? Are you going to go shopping? Are you going to go through this street or the other street? So what happened that with time, a ghetto was actually established because Jews chose not to go in Polish areas to avoid this a confrontation. And also, it's very, very insulting. Jews did not expect that from their neighbors. I would like to read what Reuven Ben-Shem, who doesn't speak about the yellow badge, because as I said, he begins his diary from the day that the wall was erected, that is November 16, 1940. Jews, of course, had to wear the badge until the end. But as of this date, in Warsaw and in other places, depending on the date, it became less important. Less important because there were other bigger problems. But let's read for a minute what Reuven, I hope I'll be able to hold this, but this is what I'm going to read. February 1941, in the evening, scenes from the ghetto of the Middle Ages appeared before our eyes. A man from Łódź with a yellow badge, just like the one worn by Jews in the Spanish ghetto, in Germany and in other European countries. In comparison to this badge, our tie, and he means the ribbon that they have to put around their arms, seems aristocratic and of special taste. In truth, Both have but one purpose: recognize the Jew from afar and putrefy him. But the badge has another virtue, and it is not only to repulse Jews' neighbors, but also to make Jews disgusted with themselves. So this period of time when the badge was introduced, and it took almost a year for the ghetto to be closed, was a very difficult time for the Jews, which made many of them happy that the ghetto was closed, because now they would not be harassed by the Poles. But this is what happened once the ghetto closed very, very quickly. What did the Germans do? Redefine the nature of private and public space by blurring boundaries, private and public, dead and living, personal and communal. What I want to say is that the dead in the streets, the Germans did not collect their bodies. It was the Jews who had to do that. The refugees that were dumped onto the ghetto, nobody cared about them unless it was the Jewish community. They have to take care of them. They had to pay also for everything, even for the walls. Do you know that? The walls were paid by the Jewish community. So let us look. What happens is that poverty becomes widespread very, very quickly. Ringelblum writes that the first to die were actually men, and of course very young children. So you can see many, many orphans in the streets, roaming the streets, begging for money, begging for food, begging for anything that you can give them, because they were completely broke, sometimes without even a place where to live. Although officially there was these points. The points were actually a translation from Yiddish, from Punkt or Punkten, and this is what they call the refugee centers erected in the ghetto. I want to point out that refugees, we tend to think of refugees as people who fled to a certain part because they are looking for something better. This is not the case with the Jews. All the refugees we're talking about are people who are evicted. Okay? All the smaller communities, bit by bit, were destroyed completely, sometimes within one day, depending on the size of the community. They were loaded onto trains, sometimes even walking, doesn't matter. The point is the people in Warsaw, the refugees that we call, they are not refugees. They are evicted people who came with very, very little of their belongings that they could carry with them. Ringelblum documents everything, documented in a very, very, let's say, restrained manner, without mentioning names, without sometimes indicating, like he talks, for example, about the rabbi from Pultusk. So everybody reading the diary, at least in those days, knows who the rabbi from Pultusk is. I don't know, but they did. He writes about the refugees, about everything, and by this time he also has other people collecting information from people around the world, around the ghetto, mainly the refugees, what happened in their communities, where they are, what the situation is, and so on. Reuven, Ben-Shem, if Ringelblum documented the public arena only, he doesn't speak about what happens in the houses. Reuven Ben-Shem does speak about it, but maybe it is the time to mention something about his diary. I already told you that he edited his diary, that his diary was actually prepared for publication in the 1960s, and it is from November 16, 1940. In 1960, Reuven Ben-Shem already knew who was living and who wasn't. In most cases. When he didn't mention the names. I mean, the names appearing in his diary, there are real names, are names of people he probably knew didn't survive, and that there was no chance that you somehow hurt their memory. so to speak. And I'm saying this because in his original diary, remember the notebook I showed you? In the original diary, he begins by saying, I want this, anybody who finds this document, to publish it. And, but publish it without mentioning real names, because I don't want to hurt anyone. When he writes this piece that you saw in the typing machine, he already uses, in many cases, names and also private stories of households. I'm going to read to you here two passages, one of how Reuven Ben-Shem describes what is happening in the points, and another short one, how Ringelblum describes what happens in the houses. So we'll start with this side, June 3rd, 1941, by Reuven Ben-Shem. Speechless, there is no ink in my pen, no energy in my brain to describe the scenes I witnessed. If God had at all meant such scenes to be presented by people, there is no doubt that these people were born and died, or weren't born at all, but are the dead whom he had sent to an exhibition so that people see different sort of corpses, the fruit of the angel of death's labor. Close to 200 people are walking around, not working, as dead, living eyes stare gravely with horror pleads and disappointment. And this happens inside one of these refugee centers. And Ringelblum discusses the houses. August 41, almost the same time. In the poor Jews' houses, such as in Voliniska Street, for example, whole families die, and it happens that the last deceased in the family is laid for a few days until the neighbors feel the stench of his corpse. Maybe not all of you know how people lived in Warsaw. At the peak of the time, there were 500,000 Jews living in Warsaw. In an area that was only 18 square kilometers, which means 27,000, 777 people per 1 kilometer. Imagine how crowded the place was. Over the years, people died. I mean, when the liquidation started, there were about 350,000 people left in Warsaw. There were already 150,000 victims. And because the situation was so awful, one of the Warsaw became a tourist attraction, especially for German soldiers. They would sneak into the ghetto to take pictures, to walk around the ghetto, and to see what's going on. But, you know, justice has a very interesting way of vindication. All the pictures that were taken, these are the pictures that we have today. Jews did not have pictures. All the pictures that you see were taken by Germans, some of them by the propaganda office, but many of them by soldiers. So Ringelblum and Ben-Shem speak about this phenomenon that is very, very disturbing. In June 1941, Ringelblum writes, often there are trips to the cemetery. They constantly take pictures of the dead, and meanwhile they laugh heartedly. Whereas Ben-Shem discusses something very special, because in this period, almost a month before the deportations began, a squad of photographers arrived in the ghetto in order to photograph the squad from the propaganda office. And they staged scenes, and they did anything in order to distort the situation even more. And this is one of the things that they did. They photographed the house of life, and for several days, they forbade burial. Sorry. The dead bodies piled up, and the horrible sight was revealed. The shame of the ghetto, multiplied many times over by the will of the obscene. Then they photographed a communal grave to which they ordered to throw the dead casually, as if throwing stones, and they fell on each other, bruising the others. Needless to add anything, right? These are some pictures of the ghetto, and to show you the issue also of photography, how the Germans, who also documented the ghetto, manipulated the information. If you look at this picture at the bottom, you can see that people stare probably to the camera. This is a picture that was taken in 1940. So it is because people stare at the camera, it is not clear whether this body is actually a body or that the German put there a body in order to take this picture. This picture also is suspected to be staged because everybody faces the camera. They see someone that is taking pictures. The other pictures, I think all of them, but I'm not sure, but this one definitely, was taken by a soldier named Willy Georg. In the course of a day, he took a trip in the Warsaw Ghetto and took almost, I think, more than 60 pictures he's considered a person who showed sympathy with his pictures. And as I said, because of his trip, we have the pictures. But look at the situation of that person, that teenager he's photographing. No shoes, bandages. The only possession that this boy has left is this cup. And these are pictures of children. This is another child hugging the father, or probably the father, I think. And these are beggar children. Many children were left by themselves, orphans, and they had to make do with whatever they could. You can't be in the houses. You go out. You seek help. There's no other way. Okay, that is towards the end. As soon as liquidation began, mid-1942, not only Jews of Warsaw, but all the Jews all over Europe, and including West Europe, they are headed to death factories that already exist and fully operated. In Warsaw, it began in July 20, 1942. I have three typical pictures here. This is the Umschlagplatz, where they gathered Jews before deportation. The Jews are outside, which means that the buildings are full of people waiting, sometimes days, outside like that, no food, no water, no bathroom, nothing. 300,000 Jews were liquidated within a month and a half. Actually, yeah, a month and a half. From July 20 to more or less September 21st, 1942. The other options for Jews is, I talked to you about the shops. Anybody who had a job in the shop was so-called safe. But where's the problem? Who worked in the shops? Men, mainly men, not women, not children. What are you going to do with your family? Many women and children were hiding in the shops in order to try to avoid deportations. But they were hunted down all the time. It was a terrible situation for these people. Sometimes, by the way, also people working in the shops, even though they had permits, once there were not enough so-called Jews for deportation, they would invade the shops and take out people regardless of their so-called good papers. This picture is taken from the uprising, and you can see the houses in flames. And these are people who were found by the Germans and are led to Treblinka, Majdanek, one of these of camps. So the thing is, the German altered the concept of human. A human being has a family. A human being has feelings. No, not when it concerns Jews. The stories that Ringelblum doesn't talk about it, he just says broken sentences about it. But Reuven Ben-Shem has passages that are simply breaking, really, really awful situation. Ringelblum's writing style completely changed. During the period of deportation, he actually doesn't write at all. What he writes is points for discussion. For example, the site at the Umschlagplatz, or the Jewish beggars. And you can't really understand what he wants to say by this, but maybe he could decipher what he meant to discuss later on. When he does resume writing, after the deportations stop for a while, it is a different report. It's not a daily report anymore. It's reports according to topics. In some of the topics, like, for example, the discussion of the shops, the discussion is, the sentences are broken. It's very, very hard to really understand what he wants to say. He leaves a lot to your imagination. Reuven Ben-Shem doesn't do that. But he doesn't write his report during that period. He writes most of his diary in hiding. That's the point. And half of his diary, I mean more than 300 pictures, half of it is dedicated to the horrible situations at the shops. How everything human completely altered, beyond recognition. So we got more or less to the end. Nazism is space control. It's downsizing and downsizing and downsizing until nothing is left. I divided that third part into 3 different topics between the private and public spheres to discuss marking the Jewish body and the process of documentation, because these are private activities, but they are also public. I mean, a Jew that wears a badge is obviously public, right? Everybody can see that. But the struggle he has to go through is private. He is the one who confronts the people. He is the one who has to think what to do. The same goes for the process of documentation. In order to document something, you have to see it. You have to be there. You have to watch. You have to choose what you're going to write, how you're going to write it. What about? So it's being present, but then going indoors in order to analyze things, in order to choose what to document. In the second part, I discussed the private sphere, and in the private sphere, 2 aspects, the dwelling, and in that I also included the points, but I also discussed the phenomenon of the outside going inside. In other words, nobody had any rest in the house. There was constant disturbance from the outside. Not only there were so many people living in one apartment, families had barely 1 room per family. There were on average 15 people in a room in Warsaw at the height of the population there. So you don't have rest in the house, but you also have things coming from the outside. Smells, voices, shouts, soldiers running, anything, okay? No peace at all, even during the night. Talk to you about the children who were roaming the streets. And with the public sphere, I discussed, first of all, visual documentation of the streets, including the cemetery, and how the inside goes outside. In other words, you saw these pictures. A person doesn't feel well, he's not going to stay indoor. You have to go outside, you have to seek help. You have to talk to someone. You have to arouse some pity in somebody's, in order to get some sort of help. And this ends up with the collapse of the boundaries, altering the concept of humans. And this happens in the shops. In the shops, if I told you that people, if I told you that people lived squeezed in smaller spaces, in the shops, there's no space. The people who worked in shops were demanded to leave their houses or whatever residence they had and go to allocated areas that belong to the shops. So there is nothing there. Sometimes, first of all, sometimes you go into houses where people were evacuated 2-3 weeks ago. Reuven Ben-Shem describes even a place where he sees the table set and food in the pots on the stove. So my book is about the exploration of the Warsaw Ghetto in the eyes of two diarists in relation to diminishing space, both physically and also metaphorically, or if you like, figuratively. And I would like to end, first of all, by showing you some of the bibliography, but you can find this in the book, and it's a lot more than this. And I would like to end with a piece that Yosima, Reuven Ben-Shem's daughter, wrote in 1940, and it's called in Polish Śmiernie, I think, Strumika, the Babbling Brook, played by Daniel Hasid. Thank you very much. And if you have any questions, thank you. I would be happy to answer them. Yes,
You mentioned looking for keywords.
yes.
Does that mean that the transcribed diaries have been digitized?
No,
Gosh,
no,
so you
not
just
yet.
went through?
Yes, I went through a book. Yes. Someone else? Yeah.
I ask about you and your journey towards them, towards this whole before and when you decided or felt, I would say love somehow, torturous love into this project. Your journey for
My journey, that I have to write another book for this. It took me, well, with the book, about 8 years, 5 years the research, and 3 years in order to publish the book. I've always been very interested in the Holocaust, and I knew Emanuel Ringelblum's diary quite well before I started, but I've never heard about Reuven Ben-Shem, because his family actually gave the diaries to Yad Vashem only relatively recently, in 2010. So it was quite new, but it was an amazing journey, very interesting, not easy, but very, very interesting. Yes? I'm sorry, but I can't hear you.
What do you think there might be in those diaries which have not yet been discovered? And you must have some idea, because date-wise, obviously something is missing.
Well, you know, in the Jewish Institute in Warsaw, there are more than 65,000 documents collected from the archive of Oni Shabbat. So I suppose that, now not all of them are diaries. Of course, as I said, they collected everything in the archive. I suppose that this is another part. I don't know why it was not discovered. In 2010, if I'm not mistaken, there were attempts to look for it under the building of the Chinese embassy in Warsaw, but the result of the excavation didn't bring anything. So, I don't know. Oh, sorry. Yes. Yes.
I was wondering, I came across a story on Ringelblum.
Of who?
Ringelblum.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Where sometimes the bodies were buried with messages inside, in which whoever wrote them put evidence as to what happened in Treblinka, and obviously in the hope that at some later stage that would be discovered. My question to you: would you say that the act of the hiding of the books is a form of resistance?
Hiding the books?
The diaries, putting the archives.
Of course, absolutely. There's no doubt about it. I mean, first of all, the main reason for writing it is it's about resistance. There were different forms, but this is one of them. Absolutely. Yes.
At the end, where you discuss altering the way humans are seen on what's happened before, I'm unclear as to whether Ben-Shem and Ringelblum felt this way, or whether they felt that the entire community felt this way. And if so, if there were, in your view, or from what you've read, there were post-war results of this.
I think that, first of all, they were very well aware because they were part of it. I mean, it was very, very humiliating. The way that, and it was also very rapid, the whole thing. So I think that they were affected personally, and they were actually expressing not so much what others felt, but also what they did, because they were part of it. I mean, walking around with a symbol, it's something horrible. And As I said, it took about a year before it became not important. I didn't mention it, but Reuven Ben-Shem, for example, doesn't speak about the Jewish badge, not only because he writes from November 16, because there are a lot more important things. I mean, what about the liquidation? Who is going to talk about the badge? It's not important anymore. So yes, I think that the process was felt personally by each of them. So, yeah, sorry. I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
I'm sorry to realize that you haven't got copies of the book.
Yes,
Here.
well, yes,
I will gladly
it's an
take
awkward
them.
situation.
I will gladly take details of anybody who wants the book and pass it, to the publishers. Because we work
Yes,
together.
No, I think we have got it all. Thank you very much. We have got already organized it.
Oh, good.
That people, I'm sure that we are all very inspired by what we heard. And I can't believe that anybody who was here would want to go out without reading the book. But what I want you, I will be out, and you will put your name, telephones, addresses, postal addresses, and the books will be collected from here to the publishers, and they will be sending the books to each individual. I also prepared in desperation, when I heard that the books weren't here, I have prepared stickers. So Vicky agreed that she will write a dedication for each of you who want. You can get the dedication on that, and when you get the book from the publisher, what you have to do is just stick it on. and just forgive me because apart from being so much involved in organizing this evening, I'm thanking all of you for being here. I'm sorry that I don't see you youngsters here, because I think that this is, the information going to stop with us, or are we going to pass it on? And obviously, I so appreciate the fact that you are here, and I'm so aching for not seeing everybody's children and grandchildren here, to hear the stories after such an incredible research that Vicky did. And I think that as a community, we should take it as a project to bring the inspiration. We had music, we had Jewish ceremony, we have the rabbi, the person in charge of culture, and little me, and adding a little bit to it as well. But I think that it hurts to see that the younger generation is not here. So please take it in consideration and think of ways that we can do. I don't know what we can do better. Could we have better somebody as Vicky? Can we have better than the musicians that were here? Could we have better daily singing and making us so emotional with the El Malem Hamim and the Kaddish and all that? What else can we do if not us taking our children, our neighbors? So what if it's raining? Think about the ghetto and how they suffer. What is it? A little drop of rain hits you at home? And while I got the stage for 1 second, thanking so deeply to all of you who made this evening a very special event. I want, while you are at the reception, and maybe everybody is over 50 to buy her books, and maybe as a gift for Pesach, you can buy more than one book. But I want to introduce you to a friend of mine who's here, and her name is Flor Kempis. Flor is, I'm not introducing, this is the lady here. If you know Liverpool Station,
Nitsa, thank you. And Dr. Nizan, thank you hugely. Let me just do a few things before we have an opportunity to, yes, purchase the books, and B, go into the reception. Just to make really clear what the situation is with the books, they were ordered to be delivered and we've been let down. So, it's an embarrassment, and I'm very sorry. David is going to be able to take names and the purchase at this much reduced price. I think it's a £55 list price. The books are available for £25. You'll get your signed dedication sticker, and the books will be available from New London Synagogue. So you can either pick them up from the synagogue, or you'll have to make a separate arrangement. The publishers will send out books to individuals. Thank you. On the subject of what else can be done, I just want to take just a moment to mention this. There's a flyer in the reception area. We're doing a tour to Warsaw, to Lublin and to Treblinka. It'll be the second tour that we've arranged in subsequent years, to understand more about the history of the Holocaust. That tour will be led by Angela Gluck, who's here. There's information here. It's in May, and the bookings are open now. You can do that. There's information on this. I want to share some grateful thanks. We have some small gifts to Maya and to Joseph for sharing so beautifully of Julian's music. We have an orchid for you. I think we can do some applause at this point. Thank you so much. No jousting with the orchids, please. We're really grateful to Mother Kate for coming and representing our local community here. And we have a copy of a book in which I have an essay, Nothing So Whole as a Sacred Heart. Thank you so much. And we also, Dr. Nizan, have a copy for you. I was thinking, you spoke at the beginning of your words of the great, possibly the greatest Jewish historian, Shimon Dubnov, who was taken to his death by the Nazis. And maybe it didn't exactly happen this way, but this is the story, that as he was being taken to his death, he said, write it down. Right. And it is this great act of resistance. It's a very Jewish act of resistance. And it was striking me as I was listening to your moving presentation that there are really three parts to that. There is the heroic act of people who wrote things down, of Ringelblum and Ben-Shem, and hundreds of others, of course. There's us who came to hear and to receive the fruits of their writing, but there's a fulcrum point between those heroes and us normal people. It's the dedicated translators, collators, editors, researchers who've made that information accessible to me. It wasn't written in a language that I can understand, and it takes the work of absolute academic dedication, brave dedication, to go into those dark places, to translate that information for us. You're serving as a fulcrum on this journey, and I was very, very moved by your presentation. I'm sure we all were. We have a book for you, and also our dearest appreciation to Dr. Victoria Nizan. Thank you so much. We have an opportunity to enjoy a cup of tea, something to drink. There are some cakes, some nibbles served next door. And if you're interested in copies of the book, David will be able to help with that process. Thank you all hugely. Just to add finally my thanks to Phil for looking after the room, to Darla who's next door, David who's worked so hard on this, and of course the extraordinary Nitsa Spiro. Thank you all so much.